Hey everyone, it's Jacqueline for Pixie Dust PhD. Disney Vacation Club is incredibly expensive, and the sticker shock of that initial purchase price can be a driving factor. For example, if you're buying DVC directly from Disney, you could be paying upwards of $255 per point. Even buying on the resale market is expensive and typically will cost you over 10 grand in just that initial price. For this reason, many Disney Parks fans who want those benefits of Disney Vacation Club but aren't picky about where they stay gravitate towards resorts with the lowest initial purchase prices. These are Hilton Head and Vero Beach. These are beach resorts though, so the annual dues are incredibly high. In today's video, we will be examining if that low initial purchase price is worth those high annual dues. Stay tuned. Hey friends, if you are new to Disney Vacation Club, please note that I'm going to skip over a lot of the basic jargon explanations in this video. If you're unfamiliar with Disney Vacation Club, please go ahead and check out my Disney Vacation Club video playlist, which I will link to in the upper right hand corner, or you can find the link in the description below. If you find this or any information on my channel helpful, please hit that thumbs up button on the video to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. Ring the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. A working knowledge of home resorts, annual dues, and direct versus resale purchases of Disney Vacation Club will be very beneficial to understanding this video. If you've got a solid grasp on these concepts, let's go ahead and get to today's main topic, Hilton Head and Vero Beach. Many folks choose to purchase Disney Vacation Club contracts at Hilton Head or Vero Beach because it essentially is initially the cheapest way to get into Disney Vacation Club. Even if you never intend to stay at either of these beach resorts, you can go ahead and use your points at resorts at park locations within that 7-month booking window. Typically, this means you'd be able to snag rooms with larger inventory amounts. Accurate as of the date of filming, the current Hilton Head price directly through Disney is $135 per point. On the resale market, you can typically snag Hilton Head for around $75 to $80 per point. Vero Beach costs a little bit less than Hilton Head at $120 per point directly through Disney and around $70 on the resale market. Compared to something like the Grand Floridian, which is $255 per point directly through Disney and between $170 to $180 per point on the resale market, these seem like a total steal. However, as we have touched on previously on the channel, the real cost of Disney Vacation Club comes in your annual dues. Annual dues really do add up over time, and annual dues at both of these beach resorts are high. It makes sense when you consider annual dues as maintenance fees. Beach resorts face more weathering and therefore will require higher annual dues in order for upkeep. To contrast, annual dues over at the Grand Floridian are $6.81 per point, whereas at Hilton Head they are approaching $10 per point, and at Vero Beach they are a little bit over $11 per point. Considering that you need around at least 75 points to make good use of a Disney Vacation Club contract, those differences in annual dues per point really do add up over time. In this video, we will be doing some modeling to project what Disney Vacation Club annual dues at Hilton Head and Vero Beach will look like in the future. Furthermore, we're going to compare this to other Disney Vacation Club home resorts with higher initial purchase prices but lower annual dues. Please do note that, of course, all models are flawed and all models are only as good as their assumptions. Ultimately, we cannot accurately predict the future with what annual dues will be. Personally, I think it's a relatively safe bet to assume that annual dues will continue to grow at around 3% per year. That being said, there really is no actual certainty of what is to come. Here, I have collected a list of historical annual dues. Data was compiled from DVC News, Resale's DVC, and the DVC resale market. I will be posting a link to download this Excel workbook in the description, so no worries about taking screenshots. You should be able to access this information at any time. From this historical dues information, I calculated the compound annual growth rate, which I will lazily call CAGR from now on. To calculate the CAGR, you first divide the final value by the beginning value, and then you raise that to the inverse time in years, and then finally you subtract 1 from the resulting value. For example, at Old Key West, this would be the 2021 dues divided by the 1991 dues. Dues have been in effect for 31 years, so your exponent would then be 1 over 31, and then finally you subtract 1. You can manually add the formula for the CAGR into Excel, or you can utilize the RRI function, which returns an equivalent interest rate for the growth of an investment. You execute the RRI function by providing the number of periods, the present value, and the future value. Here, I've done both the manual CAGR formula as well as utilize that RRI function to show you that they are in fact the same. Then to get a percentage, just multiply by 100. This value is how we are going to quote-unquote predict future annual dues rates. Let's assume you are looking for the cheapest possible initial purchase price, so that would be Vero Beach. Currently, annual dues are $11.23 per point. Please note that there are subsidized Vero Beach contracts. Essentially, when Vero Beach was originally planned, it was going to be larger than it ended up being. When Disney canceled some of the resort, this would mean that the annual dues per owner would increase. To be fair, Disney subsidized the annual dues for the owners who bought in when the resort was supposed to be larger. You can, in theory, find resale contracts with subsidized annual dues, but they are exceedingly rare. So for the purposes of this modeling, I did not include these subsidized annual dues contracts. Now let's do some basic modeling in Excel looking at how much a Vero Beach contract would cost you over time. For comparison purpose, let's pick Copper Creek. Values in blue, please feel free to edit once you download this workbook, and the workbook is dynamic, so everything below will change. For example, I can change the dues amount here in blue, and you can see that the subsequent Vero Beach dues amounts are changing. We will take this modeling out to 2041, which is the last full year of the Vero Beach contract. This is also true for Hilton Head. We really don't know what will happen to DVC resorts as they approach their expiration. I explained Disney Vacation Club expirations and postulated about the future a bit in a prior video. Check that out by clicking the card in the corner or find the link to that video in the description below. With Vero Beach and Hilton Head specifically, I would not be surprised if once they hit expiration that Disney just lets these go and sells them off to another company. Building Disney Vacation Club away from the parks was a bit of an experiment, and I think the general consensus is that it was kind of a failure. There isn't a lot of motivation for Disney to retain these resorts in my personal opinion. First, let's build out what annual dues would be through 2041. We know the value in 2021, and then we will use the calculated CAGR to estimate what it will be in the future. Once we have the dues per point, we can simply multiply that by however many points you want the contract to be. In this case, I am modeling 75 points as an add-on contract or a very small contract, as well as 160 points as a more standard contract amount. Now to compare, we will do the same calculations for Copper Creek. The actual CAGR for Copper Creek is super low since we only have 5 years worth of data and the annual dues really haven't changed that much. Rather than use such a comically small increase of annual dues over time, let's instead model both a 2% as well as a 3.5% increase over time. Now we can take the sums to find out the totals. This is only for annual dues. Then we can also calculate the initial purchase price, then add the total amount of dues for the next 20 years to that initial purchase price in order to get your actual total cost. Remember though that this is only through 2041. Copper Creek, for example, expires in 2068, so your total cost of the entire contract will be much higher. For ease of comparison though, to Vero Beach or Hilton Head, we will only be doing through 2041 currently. And now from this you can see that 75 points at Vero Beach would be around $37,000, whereas 75 points over at Copper Creek, even with a 3.5% CAGR, would end up being less than $34,000. Similarly, for 160 points, you can see that Copper Creek at the end of this time period at 2041 will cost less overall than that contract at Vero Beach. Now briefly, let's plot these and take a look. To build the plots, I will have the 2021 year be the initial purchase price plus the 2021 annual dues. And then every subsequent year will be the cell above it plus the dues for that year. So with this plot, you can now visualize that around 2035 or so is when the prices converge. After that is when Vero Beach would start to actually cost you more money than buying Copper Creek. For fun, let's add in another resort. Let's pick an expensive one like the Polynesian, which is $250 per point directly from Disney at the time of this recording. Using the CAGR we calculated at the beginning and the same overall method of determining future annual dues, we can see that the total price for 75 points of the Polynesian would be about $33,000, and 160 points would be about $70,000. Next, adding the Polynesian to the plot, you can see that similarly by 2041 Vero Beach is likely outpacing the cost of the Polynesian. Even with those massive savings in initial purchase price directly from Disney, the large difference in annual dues will catch up to you over time. Instead though, let's say you're savvy and really budget conscious, so you'll be purchasing on the resale market and not directly from Disney. Note that annual dues will not change. Annual dues are the same for direct and resale owners. but of course your initial purchase price will be lower on the resale market. On the resale market, let's estimate a Vero Beach contract to be $71 per point and a Copper Creek contract to be $147 per point. When you download this workbook, please do feel free to change these numbers in blue, and the rest of the workbook is dynamic, so it should change too. For example, if you found a Vero Beach resale contract for $65 per point, go ahead and edit that cell. Using the same method we just went through for that direct purchase, we will calculate the estimated future annual dues for Vero Beach and Copper Creek, and then create new columns to figure out what it would cost for 75 points or 160 points. And once you download this workbook, please do play around with it for the number of points you are hoping to purchase. 75 points and 160 points, of course, are only examples. We can see again that even on the resale market, the total cost for Vero Beach is going to be higher than that of Copper Creek. The annual dues really drive the total amount that you end up paying to Disney. And plotting this, you can see that around 2032 or so is when the tides start to turn and Copper Creek becomes a better overall cost than Vero Beach. For fun, let's add in an expensive resale resort, the Grand Floridian. In this case, your total cost for a 75-point contract through 2041 would be about $27,000, and a 160-point contract is shy of $60,000. Plotting the Grand Floridian along Vero Beach and Copper Creek values we previously calculated, you may be surprised to see that even the Grand Floridian may end up looking reasonable in terms of cost compared to Vero Beach in the long run. Now that we know how important annual dues are, what if instead you looked at Hilton Head, which is a higher initial purchase price than Vero Beach, but lower annual dues? Does this difference in annual dues make Hilton Head a better purchase than other DVC resorts? The Hilton Head CAGR is actually slightly on the high end at around 4.5%. That is the rate I'm using to project annual dues in this workbook. If you want to estimate what it would look like if the CAGR was lower, say 3%, I welcome you to download the workbook and play around by changing these numbers in blue. But here we are modeling future annual dues at Hilton Head based on the 4.5% growth rate. Again, let's compare to Copper Creek at both 2% and 3.5%. With lesser dues at Hilton Head than Vero Beach, the margins are now slimmer. And yet Hilton Head by 2041 will still end up costing more than Copper Creek with these assumptions. For 75 points, Hilton Head is about $35,000 compared to between $31,000 to $33,000 or so for Copper Creek. And for 160 points, Hilton Head is about $75,000 compared to between $66,000 and $72,000 over at Copper Creek. For fun, let's look at another resort. How about the ever so popular Beach Club, which also expires the same year as Hilton Head 2042. Thus far, the CAGR at Beach Club has been 3.5%, so we will use that to model future annual dues. For 75 points at the Beach Club, your total cost in 2041 would be about $35,000, and then for 160 points, it would be about $75,000. In this case, these totals are actually extremely similar to the cost of Hilton Head. Really, if the CAGR assumptions hold valid, which again we won't know until it's already happened, Beach Club and Hilton Head cost-wise are a wash. But if you'd be paying the same amount overall, I personally would rather get home resort priority at Beach Club than Hilton Head. And just like with Vero Beach, let's instead look at buying Hilton Head or a different DVC resort on the resale market. Here, I've assumed resale Hilton Head contracts go for about $77 per point. Again, dues don't change, so it's just that initial purchase price that we're editing. Comparing to Copper Creek, we get similar results. Hilton Head still costs more at either 75 points or 160 points compared to both Copper Creek, assuming a 2% or 3.5% annual growth in dues. And finally, let's compare to another resort with the same expiration as Hilton Head. This time we will do the BoardWalk Villas. I've assumed a BoardWalk resale price of $129 per point. If you are looking at a specific resale contract that costs more or less, please adjust this value to fit your needs. Next, I am using the BoardWalk CAGR of just over 2.9%. This gives us a total cost for 75 points of about $26,000, and 160 points costs about $56,000. Looking at the graph, you can see that the BoardWalk would end up being cheaper than Hilton Head over time, again with that pivotal year being around 2033 or so. Ultimately, if we're looking at long-term ownership of Disney Vacation Club, Hilton Head and Vero Beach are probably not your best bets given their very high annual dues. That being said, what if you just want to own Disney Vacation Club for the short term? There's plenty of valid reasons why that may be the case. Perhaps you don't want a super long-term timeshare commitment. Maybe you've got growing kids who love Disney now and you expect to take yearly trips for the next decade or so, but by the time they're adults, who knows if you'd still want to go even without them. Perhaps you personally just have changing interests and think you'll want to get your fill of Disney in the next 5 to 10 years, but after that you aren't so sure. Well then, you could buy a cheap Disney Vacation Club contract to stay at deluxe level hotels for, generally speaking, moderate hotel prices. You would be eating the cost of your annual dues, but if you compare those to the cost of a hotel on Walt Disney World property, you may find yourself thinking that the dues are a steal. If that's the case, let's look at what short-term ownership value may be like. After you are over your Disney Vacation Club contract and want to sell it off, do note that you have to pay some fees. As a seller, you will be paying commission, which is typically between 8% and 10%, and then there's a $20 right of first refusal fee, as well as a $150 estoppel fee. In order to make your money back from that initial purchase price, you would need to sell your contract for a rate high enough where you aren't eating the cost of commission and those fees. This means you'd want your total resale amount to be equal to or greater than the initial purchase price divided by the amount you'd be keeping, so sans commission, and in this case I've decided on 10%, and then the fees. Let's say you buy a Hilton Head contract this year for $77 per point and hope to sell it in 2031. If it was 160 points, by that time you would have paid a total of about $34,000, with about $22,000 of that being in annual dues. But those annual dues did get you access to over 10 years of vacation, so hopefully you feel it was worth it. If we use your initial purchase price to back calculate what you need to break even on that initial purchase price, you would need to sell for shy of $14,000, which would be about $86 per point. Now the big question is, in 10 years' time, will Hilton Head be worth $86 per point? With data from the DVC resale market over the past 5 years, we can see the average resale value of a Hilton Head contracts. Back in fall 2015, it was $67 per point, and in fall 2020 was $76 per point. We can use this data to calculate a CAGR, again, to see the approximate annual growth in resale value. This ends up being about 2.3%. Then, taking that 2.3% growth all the way out to 2031, you would expect the price per point to be almost $97 per point. This would definitely make your money back. However, in 2031, this contract would be expiring in a decade, and we have absolutely zero data to know if contracts that close to their expiration will retain their value or not. Similarly, we can do the same calculation for Vero Beach. In this case, let's say you bought a 160-point contract at $71 per point and used it through 2031. That means between now and 2031, you'd end up paying about $25,000 in annual dues, which I personally would view in exchange for all of your vacations. In order to reap your initial purchase price back, you would need to sell this contract for shy of $13,000 or about $80 per point. Again, we have some historical data thanks to the blogs at the DVC resale market to look at. In fall 2015, Vero Beach resale on average was $55 per point, and in fall of 2020, it was up to $66 per point. This CAGR is about 3.3%, which means that by fall of 2031, the resale price could, in theory, be up to almost $99 per point, which would definitely make you your money back. But again, we really don't know what the resale market is going to be like as we approach expirations, especially for those resorts not located at a theme park. Ultimately, are Hilton Head and Vero Beach worth it? For a long-term Disney Vacation Club property, probably not. My personal opinion is, why not instead buy a resort located on theme park property to get that desirable home resort booking window? With a Vero Beach or Hilton Head contract, you would then have only 7-month priority for any of the resorts located at Walt Disney World. This may mean only ever booking resorts like Old Key West, Saratoga Springs, or Animal Kingdom Villas that have much larger inventory. If you're more flexible with split stays, you can certainly experience other resorts, but if you're hoping to stay for 7 nights or more in the same type of accommodation, your chances of getting anything else are a little bit slim. If you're looking for a short-term Disney Vacation Club experiment, then sure, Vero Beach or Hilton Head may make perfect sense for you, and you probably will get good use out of it. The question becomes, will you make your initial purchase price back? Based on this modeling, we can say probably, but ultimately we can't predict the future. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions, or you can always hit me up on other social media platforms like Twitter and Instagram at PixieDustPhD. I'd be happy to help you work through any changes to the Excel workbook that model your exact circumstance. Also, if you are aware of any other resale sites that have historical data, please do let me know. That data would be so valuable, as I would love to go back further than 5 years for average resale prices, but for this video I used what I could find. Any information you can share with the entire community is greatly appreciated. I hope the rest of your day is super magical, and we'll see you real soon at PixieDustPhD.